Hi there, I'm Clifford Bates, and welcome once again to Reading Aristotle's Politics. Today we're continuing the book three. We're going to be looking at chapter 8 of book 3, which deals with the question of regime. Last chapter we kind of had the famous typology, the sixfold typology of the regime of the one, the few, the many, the common good, the common advantage versus the a ruler's advantage, where you had the horde dichotomy. And now we're going to continues from that point about this point. Now he says it is necessary to speak at some greater length of what each of those regimes is. In other words, that typology isn't going to be enough. For certain questions are involved, and it belongs to one philosophizing and connection with each sort of inquiry, and not merely looking towards actions, not to over. In other words, and not merely looking towards action, not to overlook or omit anything, but to make clear the truth concerning each thing. So, in other words, this is the first time philosophy is kind of mentioned in the politics of philosophy, and is concerned with the truth, not about what is inquiry to what is an inquiry that not merely looking to action and not to overlook them in anything, but rather to care the truth about it. We're concerned about the truth about it now. There's certain questions because we want to get to the truth of the matter regarding this regime, the discussion of the regime, right? So tyranny, as it was said, is a monarchic rule over of a master over the political community. So tyranny is the monarchical rule of a master over the political community, right? It's masterly rule. Okay, oligarchy is where those with property have authority in the regime, and democracy is the opposite, where those who have authority who do not possess a great amount of property but are poor. A priori means literally means without means, right? A priori, and those are the opposite who have wealth, right? The wealthy, those who with lots of property. Okay, now here this is an interesting point that he's going to say but tyranny is about ruling despotically. Well, these things about the ones who have means and the ones who don't have means, the rich and the poor. Okay. It's the tyrant is the one who's ruling despotically, like a master over, and therefore coercively, and whereas this is about the poor, but the poor is ruling coercively, because in other words, both these are equally form of coercive despotic rule. But he doesn't mention that. See, this is interesting. He doesn't mention that these are, but then if we go back earlier, a couple chapters earlier, the idea is that rule that's for the sake of the rule at the expense of the common advantage is coercive and therefore despotic in character. Therefore, yes, tyranny is clearly mentioned to be the rule of a master, but these are not said to be rule of a master for some reason. There's an issue here. The first question, therefore, this is what about here. Right? This is what the assumptions we have dealt with, right? The first question has to do with definition. If a well-off majority has authority, and similarly in the other case, if somewhere happened that the poor were a minority with respect to the well-off, but were superior and had authority in the regime, although when a small number had authority, it is called an oligarchy. This definition of the regime would not be a beautiful one or a noble one or correct. In other words, it'll be a fine one. In other words, he couldn't call it. In other words, wait a minute. What? He raised a problem. What happens if the oligarchy is supposed to mean the rule of the few, right? But what happens if the rich, the well-off, are many? Is or in the case of when the poor are few but they have authority? What about these two? What is this? What do you call them? And he goes because he says this definition of the regimes of this question of fewness or manyness, right? The quantitative account, those the one, the few, the many, that regarding raising the question of oligarchy, we assume that it means the few, but it's, in other words, he says, but wait a minute, that's not a, this is not a fine, the accepting of the definition of it being based upon the quantity defining the regime, the qualitative claim. This qualitative claim of there's two, I call it the qualitative claim, whether there's, the qualitative claim is whether the rule is done for the sake of the ruled or for the, which is defective, and the rule is for the sake of a common advantage, right? That's proper rule, that's just rule. And then one, the few, the many, right? That's the quantitative category. The quantitative, what I call the quantitative category, whether one, few, many, that's not a proper way to understand the definition. So the regime is not, shouldn't understand the regime. What differentiates the regime is oneness, fewness, manyness. That's an accident. Because why? Because he's going to say here, but even if one were to combine fewness with being well off, and number with being and manyness, being poor, as described, and describe the regimes accordingly. Oligarch being that in which those who are well off are few in number, have the offices, and democracy is that when the poor and the many in number have them, right? But another question is involved. In other words, that this is a, in other words, he's basically suggests, no, what is it? He says that no, that's it's something wrong here. That the assumption is that that's an assumption that the few is the many, and the few, and the few and the many, that the many will be poor, sorry, and the few will be rich. Now that occurs a lot of times, but what about the regime? What do we call the regime that is rich but many, and the regime that is poor, controlled by the poor, but is few, who are few? Okay, and he continues here, and he says, but this question is still important about this. How do we understand this? What shall we say about the regimes just mentioned, those two things, in which the majority is well off, and the poor are few, yet, and each has authority in the regime, right? If there's no other regime besides those we've spoken of, those six, right? So either there needs to be more regimes than that. If there's only going to be really these fundamental six types, or there's more, or maybe the criteria we define the regime is not right. See, I'm going to argue, and I argue in my book, my 2004 book, Aristotle's Best Regime, that there's if you think about this, what happens is that first typology, that first sixfold typology of one, few, many, that deconstructs because the qualitative claim is accidental. In other words, you say, let's continue this, right? The argument seems to make clear, therefore, that it is accidental that few or many have authority in oligarchies on account, on the one hand, and democracy on the other, and that this is because the well-off are everywhere few and the poor many. In other words, it's accidental. It's not what defines democracy and what defines oligarchy is not really fewness and manyness. Ooh. Hence, it also turns out that the causes of the difference are not what is mentioned. In other words, it's not the differences between this is not what's mentioned. What makes democracy and oligarchy differ is the question of poverty and wealth. Poverty, apoioia, and upoioia, right? In other words, democracy and oligarchy differ in the sense that it's about the question of poverty and wealth, right? Wherever some rule on account of wealth, whether a minority or a majority, this is necessary oligarchy. And whether those who are poor wherever those who are poor are ruling and have authority, this is democracy. So the wealthy who rule, the claim of the rule is that there should be wealthy, or the claim of the poor is that the poor we're poor and therefore we should be in charge. This is what if the poor are in charge, that's democracy, regardless of few or many. So the qualitative claim, one, few, or many, particularly in terms of what defines democracy and what defines oligarchy. Well, at least define what's defined oligarchy in that sense. And his idea about democracy also is ultimately tossed out. But it turns out, as we said, that the former are few and the latter many. In other words, the former, the rich, are few and the latter, poor, many. For few are well off, but all share in freedom. Whoa, whoa. So regarding, okay, remember the whole, and actually in the Greek, the whole question of well off and the poor is apoioi. Poioi means means, resources, things in order to live. It's resources without the means to live. Okay, whereas the rich are well, poior. Okay, so therefore that the question here is one level a dispute about that, but then he says what? But all share in freedom; they're all free, which are the cause of both disputing over the regime. So the fact that they both are free, they're both citizens and they're both equal, they dispute about what the regime is, whether they rule. Should the rich only the wealthy rule, or should everyone rule? Okay, in that sense, right? That's the whole point, and this is how this chapter, a very short chapter, it says that it basically deconstructs the original sixfold typology. The sixfold typology is not the real teaching of the politics about regimes. It is presented only on the count, and he repeats. This is something that will repeat itself again in the introduction. It's the first step to get. It's the first. I think this is the common opinion. This is the first level. We start with an opinion about a thing. We see we test it to truth, and we discover either its truthness or falseness, and we discover the more truth things. And that's why we get this discussion here about back. Let's go back for a second. This is why we have this concern about philosophizing here, and concern with the truth of the matter, not the apparency of the thing. In other words, with the sort of inquiry, not merely looking towards action, and not merely looking towards praxis or action, not to overlook or omit anything. In other words, we're not looking only at doing how things work, and we're looking at the truth of the matter, right? And therefore, for the truth of the matter, the question of this becomes much more problematic. That it's not this one, few, many things. Remember that again, we have to remember that criteria of aristocracy, the term aristocracy being that of the many for the advantage of the common advantage, is not is a thing of we people accustomed to call that. It's convention. It's opinion. It's the level of opinion. So therefore, the typology starts with the level of opinion about these things, and it's in his ways is making fun of Plato. Now, some people will say, "But wait a minute, Mr. Clifford, he brings this again at book 8, chapter 10, where he talks about the regimes." Yeah, but there it's not. What's interesting there is democracy is mentioned. And it's the rule of the money, like this idea of not of the rule. He's making fun of not democracy in terms of Plato's republic, where it's the honor lovers, but rather those who have a little money. In other words, it's a minimal oligarchy. This idea of a small tithe of determining this, therefore there is this weird. Yes, there's a repeat, but again, I think the repeat is he's not concerned with the regime there. He researched this authority of this common belief in order to talk about the different regimes. He needs to talk about the regime because the regime and friendships are tied. But there, it's in the discussion there, I argue in my book in the that account in book 10, chapter 8. Book 8, chapter 10. Sorry, is about democracies, defending democracy, ultimately coming out that democracy ultimately shows to be a better argument. And I think this is what's going on here. There's something else, it's something like that we get the deconstruction of the typology here in this chapter 8. Chapter 8. The typology is deconstructed, and that therefore we have to think again about what defines the regime. And what defines the regime will be the claim it makes about the way of life, of who should rule. Who should rule? In other words, the claim about justice, the claim about who justly rules. Okay, and that's where we leave off, and it goes off to our next chapter, chapter 9. I'm going to stop here. I'm going to let you, if you have any questions or comments, please. I know, yes, the last video I kind of rushing because I had a meeting and I got a phone call. You got the phone call, and then I had to just talk about this and I couldn't answer. I'm going to say, if you have any questions, comments, please put them below. I will respond to them when I see them. If you have liked what you like it and share it with a friend. If you didn't like it, say why, please. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. And if you have subscribed, please encourage friends to join. Bring some friends and show them the thing. So that's why forwarding a thing, could maybe forward some of the other ones. You can go look at the other things and the other readings that we've done so far that I've covered here. If you wish to help, now you can follow me on social media below. If you want to help this channel now, because it's getting expensive. Let's be honest. This is this little thing I'm doing. It's the size. The things is no longer free on YouTube. I have to probably kill things if I'm going to keep on trying. That's gone. I even bought something. I thought I could pay. I bought the small program, and then I even bought and then even that was enough. The initial thing, I thought, okay, I get something. Well, no, it was easily within a month it was gone, and then therefore I think that's a trick they do to get the ridiculous amount program. Then what happened was I bought the new one. Now I'm 50%, and I think in 6 months I will be. If we continue this at this rate, within the 6 months I will be piled up in this. And the next criteria is high. So I mean, I either have to kill things or I don't want to kill things. I mean, I'm thinking about returning. So that's why I'm asking about when you subscribe to our Patreon is a way you can help if you want to preserve this. Otherwise, it's I have to find some money. So it's getting tough in that sense. And also, you buy your books, sell your books. Okay, yeah. I need to buy. I was buying to buy books too, and it's a choice between keeping YouTube up and buying a book. I might have to forget about YouTube. So that's that. That's why Patreon is there, and I'm horrible about that. Maybe if I had incentive programs and things like this. Well, I'm too old. I'm set in my way. I'm sorry. I wish there was someone a real patron say, "Hey, Clifford, here's a bunch of money to go keep on doing this." That's something great to do. Okay, but there's a way you can help. You can, if you're doing this, you're studying politics, you want to do more. You can go buy my from Lulu. If you buy from Lulu, I make more money from it because Lulu. Because if you buy it from Amazon, other places, they have to make a profit. But if you buy it by Lulu, I get what the profit that Amazon would have gotten. They're a little expensive, but I understand that people don't like that because they don't give you the free shipping. But that's the way the cookie crumbles, right? But regardless, if you buy it, I still make something. So however you think, you want to buy it for a friend or buy it for yourself. You bought it yourself and you liked it. This is it's basically a study guide to understand the politics. It's what's called notebook. It's not a summary. It's not a commentary. It's a student workbook. That notebook about the text. It helps, does it, gives drafts and things like this. Okay, that's it. That's my shill for the day. My shill. I'm sorry to do this. I'm shilling. Okay, sorry. That's it. I will see you again soon. We'll turn next time to chapter 9. Have a good day. Take care. Bye bye.